everybody, and welcome to a off-season edition of the Winging It F1 podcast. I'm Freddie. I'm here to lead the episode today, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host Adam, and we're going to talk to you about a few little bits of F1 news, a few little sort of silly season things that are slotting into and slotting out of place. We will have a season review kind of thing coming up later on, where we've got Nigel back in the fold. We've kicked him out for today. We think he's gone to kind of mourn by going to buy some fish and chips in Whitby for some reason. But you know, the miracle life of Nigel can be touched upon in the future. But we just got Adam and I here to grind to talk about a few little bits of news. Like I said, Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I've been enjoying watching the World Cup over the last 2 weeks. I think it is now. I missed my first games yesterday, which was a shame, but streak had to come to an end at some point. But yeah, no, I've been enjoying that and just having football on every day. I don't feel like I've been missing F1 too much. Obviously, there's kind of been bits of news that have come out, as always happens in the few weeks after a season ends. But I don't kind of feel, I don't feel kind of a yearning for it yet. And yeah, just kind of I'm quite happy. Nearly Christmas, so that'll be nice. I like Christmas. It's good.
Brilliant. I'm very happy for you. um, do you know who also likes Christmas? Daniel Ricciardo. Segue. Not a good segue. But he's got for an early Christmas present this year a not Red Bull drive, Red Bull role where he's not even not even a third reserve driver. He's a development simulator ambassador boy, and it's not really a good role. Let's be honest. All he does is take on the PR workload that Max Verstappen and Checo Perez can't really do, which is a shrewd thing for Red Bull to get. But you know, it's just a role for Ricciardo, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a spring roll, but maybe better or maybe worse, depending on if you like Chinese food. I think that I
That's
could have gone
weird.
with a lot of rolls there, but went a bit left field, especially seeing it is winter, not spring. I think seems to be a lot of people who've come at this with seeing it as a Red Bull master plan to replace Perez with Ricciardo in 2024. And I think, I don't want to put words in Nigel's mouth, but I think he said that he could buy into that or he could see that happening. So
No, surely he didn't.
he,
That's the most un-Nigel opinion ever, though. Surely.
I think on our one of our many Slack conversations, then I think he kind of said he can believe that or but yeah, I think I don't know what I think. It's obviously not as good as a official reserve driver role. So I don't know what was kind of being mooted at Mercedes, which seemed to be a big other option about whether it would have been the same thing or whether it would have been a bit more traditional third driver there. But yeah, I think it's obviously good in the sense that he'll stay in the F1 world. He'll be able to stay in the F1 paddock if he so chooses. And when me and Nigel spoke about this, I think I said that I thought he should. I I was surprised he didn't fight a bit harder to stay in a seat in F1. And I feel like taking a year out should never be your kind of top option, and it felt like that's what it was for Ricardo. But I don't think it will kind of. I think he's kind of the new Hulkenberg in a way, in just he's the most experienced driver and really the only driver with multiple seasons under his belt, apart from Giovinazzi, or over 2 or 3 seasons under his belt that's out there. So I think he'll kind of be, in 6 months' time, he'll probably be the one that's being linked to every seat that could possibly be available. But I think at Red Bull, there's not a progression there. To be honest.
Yeah, I think it is very much a heart move where he wants to stay in F1, but also wants to stay in F1, doesn't want to be at the back, which is fine. That makes sense. And it's just one of those things which just kind of worked so hard to get to F1. Just now that F1 spat him out, he's clinging on with his fingertips. And I think it is a great move for Red Bull. They get some great content out of it, but he's an actor now. He's a character for Red Bull, not a driver. And yeah, he was
Probably
very
yes.
good when he was a Red Bull driver, but now and that's just all Daniel Ricciardo is now, and it's really unfortunate. But I think crucially, it is a thing. It wasn't really his choice in the end between Red Bull and Mercedes for a third driver role. Mercedes talks stalled and Red Bull's talks progressed, and that's just how it ended up. It just didn't play out with Mercedes in the end, with sort of consecutive concurrent talks. And Haas have been quite open on the fact that they kind of thought, well, to be honest, looking at his performances this year, even if he did give us a call, and even if he wasn't so sort of elusive, we probably would have just looked at him and kind of thought, are we entirely convinced by Daniel Ricciardo now? And um, that's a very legitimate and probably correct opinion to have, I think. When you look at the fact that he probably realistically is the reason that McLaren lost P4 in the constructors to Alpine, then he's not worth what he is to a team. So I think he's taking what he can get, and it's something. But I think he needs to kind of get out there and do a bit of racing, because he's not. He's a good brave face man. I wouldn't want to be in his position if I were a racing driver. You look at them all of them, they go, well, it's the most boring job in the world being a reserve driver. No wonder Nick de Vries and Robert Kubica go and drive so many other things when they're reserve drivers, because it's better than standing and
Yeah,
having coffee.
I, I see what you mean. I think I don't know. I can still kind of see. I think the just having that link to F1 and being still at the forefront of people's minds is still, I think, quite valuable. And being in Red Bull, being able to, have that kind of access to a simulator, potentially access to free practice sessions, which every team is giving them away at the end of this season. So I feel
Yeah, but
like
he's not done only 2 Grand Prix, so he wouldn't count towards that quota.
no, but neither are Giovinazzi, for example. So I think, yeah, fundamentally, if it's a practice session at the end of the season, I think there's not that much demand from, and I think we saw that with the this season from the grid. They've done that.
I don't know. I don't know if it's Red Bull style that they didn't do it with Albon, um, and Giovinazzi only did it because Ferrari asked Haas to, and things like that. So I don't think he'll get if he gets a practice session next year, then that would be a really odd move, in my opinion, and
Okay,
because I think
really,
the
really
only
surprised. I
yeah, I
don't.
think the only reason Liam Lawson was in the Red Bull at point and Yuri Vips at points this year was because it was mandated by regulation. It's not anything to do with that, with teams being kind. Sorry, I interrupted your point.
No, no, it's fine. I think, and yeah, just kind of more, yeah, more generally, I just think, being around the, as I say, I think being in the seat. I think Williams is actually the one that I'm surprised. It sounds like he didn't really push for us all. They, could well have gone with Logan Sargent anyway. But I feel optimistic for him. Really, as time passes, then the kind of memories of how bad this season was will fade, and the memories of that will kind of become absorbed into how good he was at Red Bull and Renault before that. So I feel optimistic that we will see him back in a full time F1 role at some point in the next couple of years. I don't think that'll be with Red Bull, but yeah, I think it's kind of obviously now it's extremely fresh, and he probably might well need a break. But I think as it goes on, as I said, he is the most experienced head out there on the free market or as a free agent at the moment, and that will count for more and more as the memory of the McLaren awfulness fades. So yeah, I don't think we've seen the last of Daniel Ricciardo in F1.
I, some bit of me looks at it and thinks that the McLaren awfulness is too big of um a a black mark against his name now for it to fade and to grant him a second chance. For me, in my opinion, I do think you're right. He's the best person to call on for a reserve driver next year, but I think the manner in which he's left Formula One hasn't been like, oh, they just missed out on a seat due to the merry-go-round. when you can look at with people like Hulkenberg and things like that. He missed out. He lost his seat because he was sacked because he wasn't performing and has been replaced by a rookie. Because of that, to me that's too negative, really, for a team in the. I don't know. I
think the
really
fact
don't
that
know.
I think the fact that it was one team, at McLaren, it's not kind of it's not experience that he's had over multiple teams or in multiple different setups. Really,
No,
that's kind
no.
of where I think teams, you can easily make those excuses, and I think if you can build around, I think teams will think themselves around those reasons. So yeah, I think there will be, that kind of, yes, it will count against him, but the fact that it was McLaren, we've talked about on this podcast several times how, the McLaren is a strange car and Sainz is really the outlier in someone coming from outside the system and doing well there. But we'll see how Piastri does as well, because that could kind of influence how Ricciardo seemed weirdly. So yeah,
Yeah,
but I think,
yeah.
yeah, I just think teams will be able to, make excuses in their heads, or, they'll be able to kind of build themselves out of
I wish I was as optimistic. But
that.
rather than going around in circles on that,
Yeah.
um, I think it's just a case really to to sort of wish him best with that, and to move on to other news about someone who might also not have a second chance somewhere else because of the way things happen, is that Massimo Binotto has left Ferrari. It's officially a resignation. Whether he jumped before he could be pushed or whether he was pushed, we don't know. But these things tend to be a sort of mixture of the two. Um, and what are your thoughts on this, Adam? Because it can be seen in many lights, but do you think it's just another head in the Ferrari chopping block, or do you think it's the right move for Ferrari?
I think firstly, I buy into the thought that he was pushed to jump. Really, I think it was. I can't really see him wanting to give that up unless there was absolutely no choice. And I think he did seem committed to, even though the season had been difficult, he did seem really committed to building for next season and having a better next season with Ferrari. So I don't think he will have been wanting to step away from that unless he absolutely had to and was told that he would be fired or could resign. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. But yeah, in the wider sense, I think it would have been ideal for him to go back into a technical role with Ferrari, as I think everyone does, or most people, with who've weighed in on this. But it's just not politically possible. I don't think that was never on the cards. It's not, especially at Ferrari. At most teams, probably not. But yeah, I don't think that was ever there. That would have been the ideal scenario for both team and Binotto, really. I'm not a massive fan of it. I think the work he's done to get Ferrari to where they're at, because we're in Spa. Leclerc said that the Belgian Grand Prix this season was where he gave up and he realised that he wasn't winning the championship. But if you compare that Spa 2 years ago, that was the absolute nadir of Ferrari's season, and I think they finished something like 15th or
Ferrari's
16th.
Ferrari.
And they were just awful. They were getting passed by everyone on the straights, and that, for Binotto to have come back from a season where they were just not at the races at all. They were really uncompetitive. They just didn't have it was worse than Mercedes' season this year by a long stretch, and I think maybe people are forgetting how bad it was. And for Binotto to have brought them back from that to where they were capable, we thought they were capable of challenging for the title at the start of the season, being capable of winning races and challenging regularly at the front for race wins is really impressive. I think that's not maybe been given enough credit. And yes, you need to have an experienced head, or a tactical head there who can make the right decisions in the heat of battle, but you've also got to be battling at the front in the first place. And I think maybe, there's that. I think there's maybe a undervaluing of what Binotto brought to get Ferrari into the battle at the front, even if he couldn't win it.
Yeah, I pretty much concur with that. Yeah, I think he's only gone because it's necessary from the higher ups to give him a easy way out. But I do think it's the wrong decision, really, because I echo what you said. What he's done to Ferrari is bring them through a difficult patch that wasn't of his making, that he realistically inherited. When you look at all the 2019 engine stuff, which is when he started, that was all already in progress, and that then obviously hampered 2020 and 2021 with the car. And the way they've come through that was rebuilt that to a pretty staggering third in 2021, and to being way ahead of expectations for 2022. And if you're being incredibly charitable to Ferrari and Binotto in that front, he's been dumped because he did too well at the beginning of the year. In that it set expectations incredibly differently for the remainder of the year. I think when you look at Binotto's strengths, you look at when he was technical director and of Ferrari from sort of late 2015, early 2016, going through to 2018, where that when they had the regulation change there, that car realistically dictated the aerodynamic progress of the majority of the grid for the next couple of seasons, based on the creativity and culture that Binotto instilled into that design office at Maranello, rather than instilling a sort of heads will roll attitude that there had been before. Because in 2014 there were 3 team principals, so there was very much a scare culture that Binotto did a fantastic job when he got into the top technical role to get rid of and to change over, which is why he was given the big job, which makes sense on the face of it. But I think, like you say, he was probably appointed one position too high for where he was perfect, and that's lets this then play out. You could make a case for him being a bit too nice as well, because he creates this kind of brilliant culture where people aren't afraid to push and make mistakes and things like that, but then they're not learning from the mistakes and so on. And you can have a no blame culture, which is what he's tried to instill, but also have a sort of a relationship with the problem, rather than completely ignoring it. And I think that's the only thing you could really look at. And I do think that does need to change, but I don't think that's I think it's really difficult to sort of say that kicking out Binotto will change that for the better in any way. I think either it keeps it the same or changes it for the worse. And I think I don't really know who can come in. We'll get on to who will replace him, but I don't think I know anyone who can come in who can refine anything in Ferrari in a way that Binotto kind of could.
I think, kind of on your point of him being too nice, I think maybe the way he handled things, or I do think maybe he was a bit too kind of optimistic rather than realistic in, especially I think it was after Hungary. Then he said there's not a problem with our strategy when there very clearly was problems there. So I think maybe the way he went about handling some of Ferrari's problems could have been improved. And I don't know how much of a factor that played into his eventual exit. But yeah, I think again they were 6th in 2020 in the Constructors' Championship and a lot closer to 7th and 5th. So to come back to finishing second, and winning races was very impressive. And yeah, I hope that he can find somewhere where he is able to get on with what he does best, and his talents are appreciated, and that because I do think he has a lot to contribute to F1 in a role that suits his expertise.
Well, it smacks of politics, really, that he was appointed by Sergio Marchionne and Louis Camilleri, who followed on from that, and now the two people, those positions aren't there anymore, and you've got John Elkann and I want to say Enrico Vente or something, I can't remember his name, but something like that, who are now very much the talk is that they're not really behind Binotto. They were never Binotto's people. He was never their man, and he just didn't make the impression that he needed to late last year and early this year, and has now just been shown the door. And that's just an annoying consequence of the way the Ferrari business has worked. And the only sort of thing you can really think of then for a replacement, which is what we'll talk about now, is that Binotto was just finished his 28th year at Ferrari. He started there after university. He worked through under the Jean Todt era, all the way through the World Championships. He is a World Championship winning engineer, though, let's be honest. But was he too entrenched in a Ferrari mess that frankly it's the necessity is that someone external will do better, or would you continue to appoint someone from inside in the way that you think, in the way that they did with Binotto? What route would you go down for a successor, Adam? Because Ferrari don't have a game plan, and they've said early 2023, which is a long way from now, and the CEO of Ferrari is going to be taking over as an interim team principal. So this is not very well done since. So what's their sort of savior?
Well, that's a very good question. I think, I mean, Vasseurs the obvious name. I just wouldn't have replaced Binotto for Vasseur. I think, yes, he's probably more kind of savvy, a bit more savvy than Binotto. I think people are kind of overrating how well he's done, really, where Alfa Romeo, who's been one of the worst outfits on the grid for the past few years now, I think it's the only team not to have taken a podium or a pole position in the last 3 years or 4 years. So, they're not a kind of model of, David versus Goliath either. But I think, he's the kind of most obvious name out there. So unless they kind of promote someone else from within, who I don't know the kind of Ferrari setup well enough to know that. And, it's if Binotto was the guy a few years ago, I don't know who else would have got into that role quickly enough. So, yeah, I mean, I'm saying Vasseur because I don't really know who else there is out there, to be honest.
Yeah, Vasseur, I think, is, he's got an obvious Leclerc connection. He's done very well with ART, with GP3, GP2, and so on. Throughout his career. And, if you look at that model of appointing someone who's done very well on the junior ranks into a Formula One team, it usually does go quite well. And he's had a hard job to work with Alfa Romeo Sauber when he came in. And realistically, he has lifted that team, you could say, because they now finished 6th in the constructors as opposed to 8th, 9th, and 10th, I think, nearly 10th at one point. And that team has had a lift, but it's not a superb lift, and it's been a really odd one. But they've sold that team to Audi and things like that. So if there's going to be a gap for someone to leave a team, it's Vasseur. And his relationship with Charles Leclerc, like I said, is excellent. But I don't see why you would go for it. Other candidates, perhaps you buy out Andreas Seidel. Perhaps you try and convince Ross Brawn to come back to the fold, which I think is a never going to happen move. Perhaps you recruit internally and just hope for the best that the problems get solved, but you end up with the same kind of reason that you're getting rid of someone. You end up with yesterday's man. And I realistically think the best bet is to get someone completely outside of Formula One, because I think the best team principals who've come in recent years have been allowed to sort of exercise a bit of freedom and have come from sort of big other organizations. Andreas Seidel came from Porsche to McLaren and has really instilled a very good relationship and really solid, happy team in McLaren. Mike Crack has come from BMW to Aston Martin, and I don't know if anyone's got a bad word to say about him operationally. He's got a good bit of good relationship with his higher ups and a good relationship with his team. So I don't know if there's anyone that Ferrari can turn to outside, but who outside Formula One, that is, to go for. Maybe someone who's been successful in lots of motorsport. I don't know who. Alan McNish is the big Audi guy when you go to Alan McNish, but he's just a name I pulled out of thin air. Ian James, the McLaren Formula E guy who did so well with Mercedes when it was the Formula E team there. But these guys are so entrenched into their other teams that why would they take the Ferrari job? So I think there's a big question of candidates, but there's a big question for candidates. Why take it?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, is how much of an attractive proposition is it when you get, such a potentially short leash as Binotto's got, and that's coming in from, a team that wasn't that has improved competitiveness. Now, there's not that much further for them to go upwards, really. So it's it feels like the pressure will be on to get results straight away. And yeah, I don't like. There's not a big name out there that you'd expect them to pull in. So then it's kind of whether they bring someone else in, like you said, and you kind of have more of a knowledge of that than I do. But yeah, it's just not. There doesn't seem to be any obvious, or there's the obvious in Vasseur, and then there's not really anyone else, and he's not the big name that you'd expect them to jump for. So yeah, I think it's
It
again
probably is
it's
the best name, really.
mm, but yeah, I don't think yeah, like you said, I don't think maybe Andrea Sada will work, maybe not, but I don't think. I mean, to be honest, I don't think bringing back a Ross Brawn who has just retired from F1.
It's a
Um,
second retirement.
yeah, it is a good, it's a silver
Mm.
bullet either. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
they are. I think they're in trouble, to be honest, in terms of who they bring in.
Yeah, and it realistically is a watch this space moment for Ferrari, which is just such poor planning because they've gone from, very realistically making a case for looking ahead at 2023 and being in a good mode to go and take the fight to Red Bull and realistically take the fights to Mercedes, looking at where everyone was at the end of the season. And they were in moderate. They've been really good in 2022 performance wise, and 2023 they 2020 end of 2022 you could argue they were shaping in pretty okay ways with that strategy at Abu Dhabi. So they can do it. So they know they can do it. They ended on a high at least. I'm being very generous here. But it's just work's just going to stop. It's going to be a whole December and most of January is going to be nothing, surely. So I just do you think this, as I've probably this has now become a very loaded question. Do you think this marks how big a issue do you think this is for 2023 and beyond for Ferrari competitively?
I think it's the probably and beyond that's more of an issue. They'll have got a lot of their 2023 stuff done already. And I mean, to be honest, maybe more the second half of 2023 onwards. But it, I'm not going to kind of commit to anything because they could pull someone in, like a Seidel who can really help them turn it around. And I don't think it's the absolute death knell, but I think they do. It's it's the worst possible situation you can think of, really, to be going into the next few years, where you should have a realistic shot of competing for the title and winning the title. So yeah, um, I think it's still a very it depends question, but it's definitely the worst kind of possible planning you could have going into 2023. So yeah, I think watch this space, but it's not ideal, is it?
Not at all. We we don't see this anywhere else. Toto Wolff's been at Mercedes for how long? Christian Horner's been at Red Bull for even longer. So, and they've won every championship since 2010 and 2009 really. But that was Brawn. So I just there needs a bit of continuity. And I really want it to work for Ferrari because it's just they're not doing themselves any good. So let's hope they don't fall into the abyss after this and they can sort of stay where they have been and kind of maybe even improve.
I mean,
That would add, but
I think even something like Alpine getting rid of Abiteboul and then getting Safnauer in, there was a plan there. There's a continuity there, whereas this is just
even the car crash that has been Alpine management, whether as the Renault Works team, for being Abiteboul, for being Bukowski, being Fred Vasseur as well at the same time, and then being Safnauer, but also Laurent Rossi, and I think Alpine, to be honest, is the team that proves that you shouldn't really have too much meddling from the board because you lose your star driver called Fernando Alonso because they're all just messing around and meddling. So, and that's worked a bit because Otmar Safnauer has now gained a bit more autonomy in that team, and Laurent Rossi has taken a step back because he's a boardroom man. He's not an F1 man. And what we've got in Ferrari is boardroom men, not F1 men dictating F1 to someone who's been in F1 for best part of 30 years. So it's I don't know. I think I tend to sort of lean to the experienced hand in these kind of things and the F1 hand, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We've postured long enough on Ferrari this year. It probably would have been very interesting to see where Nigel's landed on this, because he has very much called for jobs of people in the past, and I think you and I are a bit more kind of a heads will roll attitude doesn't really work for anyone. So it'd be interesting to have him in this conversation. But I'm sure we'll get Nigel's points of view when we declare Charles Leclerc as the second best driver of 2022 in our season review, which will come up in December.
Yeah, it was interesting. Me and Nigel spoke about this a few weeks ago, and me and him both came at it from similar points of view, but both kind of came to a different end result. Where I said keep BinottOh for what he's got, particularly his technical expertise, and Nigel came at it from point of view of he's not. You can't win the championship if you've got him at the top. So we kind of came at it with similar logic, but he was one who thought that Vasseur should come in. So yeah, we'll see if he's changed his mind when we talk about it next.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. So Nigel, wherever you are, I think I said you're in Whitby, so enjoy your scampi, and everyone else listening to this podcast also enjoy your scampi.
Buy some scampi.
Get some scampi. Scampi's amazing. Scampi's the best. It's my fish and chip shop order sometimes. But anyway, we'll be back with a sort of season review kind of thing coming up later. Don't worry, we probably won't list every race and go 7 out of 10, because that would be dull.
And we already did that for 2/3 of the races in the summer.
Yes. Yes. We might try and do something a bit more exciting. Who knows? Maybe we'll make Nigel spin a wheel or something. If you want to see that, leave suggestions for what goes on the wheel in the comment section of the YouTube video, or tweet us at WingingItF1, or tweet Nigel at NigelCJourno, and tell him what you want him to do. Because if we can make this a thing, we can really, hammer it home how, I don't know, how much we get him to do weird things, and how we can make him do even weirder things. So get behind this. Adam, say goodbye to the people at home.
Goodbye to. I mean, I am at home, so if Kate or Katie or Harry are listening, then you don't need me to say this. But to everyone else who is not at home, but not my home, goodbye.
Goodbye.